They've conquered stadiums across 5 continents, shattered streaming records that the industry didn't even know existed, and built an empire of self-produced music that turned the entire K-pop playbook upside down. 8 young men from JYP Entertainment who were once told they weren't good enough, who survived an elimination survival show just to earn the right to debut, and who clawed their way from underdogs to one of the biggest fourth-generation acts in the history of Korean pop music. But here's the question nobody dares to ask out loud: when does it all stop? When do the lights go dim for the last time? When does Bangchan finally put down the producer headphones? When does Han stop pouring his soul into lyrics at 3 in the morning? Is there a member who's already secretly counting down the days? Or is there one who refuses to even imagine a world without Stray Kids? You think you know these 8 members, but what if their answers about retirement reveal something far deeper than just a number? What if it exposes their greatest fears, their wildest dreams, and the unspoken promises they've made to each other and to stay? Some of their answers will shock you, some will break your heart, and at least one will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about loyalty in this brutal, unforgiving industry. Who plans to hold the mic the longest, and who's already dreaming of a quieter life far away from the spotlight? Buckle up, because this countdown is about to get intensely personal. From number 8 to number 1, we're revealing the age each Stray Kids member says they'll retire, and trust us, you are not ready for what's coming. Number 8. I.N, the youngest voice with the oldest soul, the answer nobody expected. Young Hyunjin. Born on February 8, 2001, in Busan, South Korea, the same fierce, ocean-kissed city that gave the world some of K-pop's most legendary names. He was the last member to join Stray Kids, the maknae, the baby of the group, the one everybody instinctively wanted to protect. But here's what most casual fans don't realize: being the youngest in a group like Stray Kids isn't a privilege, it's a pressure cooker. While other kids his age were worrying about school exams and weekend plans, Hyunjin was standing in front of JYP Entertainment judges, fighting for his dream with a voice that cracked under pressure and a heart that refused to break. He was only 16 years old when Stray Kids officially debuted on March 25, 2018, with the mini-album I Am Not 16. Let that sink in. While most teenagers are still figuring out who they are, Hyunjin was already performing on national television, learning complex choreography until his legs gave out, and trying to find his identity inside a group of insanely talented older members who had already forged their artistic voices. And if you think the survival show Stray Kids on net was easy for him, think again. He was the one who had to prove himself the hardest because he was the least experienced, the least polished, the one critics whispered about behind closed doors. But Bangchan saw something in him, a raw, untamed potential wrapped in a shy smile and a voice that could shift from angelic softness to stunning power in a heartbeat. That belief from his leader became the anchor that kept Hyunjin grounded through some of the most intense years of his young life. Fast forward to today, and the maknae of Stray Kids is no longer just the cute one. His vocal evolution has been nothing short of extraordinary. Listen to his parts in Megaverse, S-Class, or La 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 La, and you'll hear a confidence that didn't exist in the early days. His tone has matured, deepened, and developed a texture that vocal coaches describe as remarkably versatile for someone his age. He went from being the member fans worried about the most to the one who consistently delivers surprise standout moments in live performances. His growth isn't just musical, it's personal. In countless V-Lives and fan interactions, Hyunjin has shown a wisdom and emotional depth that contradicts his age. He talks about gratitude with a sincerity that makes even the older members pause. He reflects on the sacrifices of trainee life with a maturity that you'd expect from someone with decades of experience, not someone still in his mid-20s. And that's exactly why his answer about retirement hit so differently. When the topic of retirement came up, when the members were asked point-blank at what age they think they'll step away from the idol life, I.N didn't hesitate for long. He thought about it quietly, the way he always does, processing, weighing, calculating the emotional cost of every word, and then he said it. Age 35. 35 years old. That means, by I.N's own estimation, he sees himself performing, promoting, and living the idol life for roughly another decade from now, give or take. And before Stay loses their collective minds, let's unpack why this answer makes so much more sense than you think. Hyunjin has always been someone who values normalcy. In interviews, he's spoken repeatedly about the things he missed out on: a normal school life, hanging out with friends without schedules, waking up without an alarm set by managers. He enrolled in Hanlim Multi-Art School, a prestigious arts high school in Seoul, but his experience there was nothing like what regular students go through. While his classmates were forming study groups and going to after-school hangouts, Hyunjin was racing between practice rooms and recording studios, squeezing homework into van rides between schedules. He graduated, sure, but he's admitted in quiet moments that the experience felt incomplete, like reading a book with half the chapters torn out. That longing for normalcy isn't weakness, it's honesty. And in an industry that punishes honesty, Hyunjin wears it like armor. At 35, he would have spent nearly 2 full decades as a public figure, a performer, an idol whose every move is watched, analyzed, and judged by millions. 20 years. That's longer than most idol careers by a significant margin. The average lifespan of a K-pop group, according to industry data, hovers around 5 to 7 years. Many don't even make it past their first contract renewal. Stray Kids already shattered that norm when all 8 members re-signed with JYP Entertainment in 2024, a move that sent shockwaves through the industry and proved that their bond wasn't just manufactured for cameras. But Hyunjin knows that loyalty to the group and loyalty to himself don't have to be in conflict. Retiring at 35 doesn't mean he stops loving music, doesn't mean he abandons Stay, and it certainly doesn't mean he regrets a single second of the journey. What it means is that he's already thinking about the person he wants to become after the stage lights fade. And honestly, that kind of foresight is rare, especially in an industry that conditions artists to believe that their identity and their career are the same thing. Hyunjin knows better. He's the magne who grew up faster than anyone expected, and his answer reflects a young man who wants to experience life beyond the 4 walls of entertainment. Travel without schedules, love without tabloids, mornings without makeup artists, and a freedom that most idols don't taste until it's too late to enjoy it. Some fans might hear 35 and feel a sting of sadness, a selfish wish that he'd say forever. But real love for an artist means respecting their right to choose when the curtain falls. And I.N? He's already chosen thoughtfully, bravely, and with the quiet grace that has always been his signature. But here's the thing that should keep you watching. If the youngest member, the one with the most years ahead of him, is calling it at 35, what does that tell you about the others? Is there a member who plans to go even earlier, or did the magne actually set the floor? And more importantly, is there someone in this group who looked at that question and said, retire? I don't even know the meaning of that word. Stay locked in, because this list is about to take turns you genuinely won't see coming. Number 7, Lino, the silent rebel who already knows his exit plan, a life beyond the stage. Lee Miho. Born on October 25, 1998, in Gimpo, South Korea, a city just west of Seoul, close enough to the capital to smell the ambition in the air, but far enough to breed a sense of independence that would come to define everything about him. Before Lino was Lino, before the sharp choreography and the devastating stage presence, before the viral fan cams that racked up tens of millions of views, Miho was a backup dancer. Not for some small-time act for BTS. Yes, that BTS. During their 2016-2017 era, young Miho was part of the dance crew that supported one of the biggest acts on the planet, standing just meters away from the kind of fame that most people can only dream about. But standing in someone else's spotlight was never going to be enough for him. He wanted his own. So when JYP Entertainment's audition came calling, Miho packed up every ounce of courage he had and walked through those doors, knowing full well that the road from backup dancer to main stage was paved with rejection, exhaustion, and the kind of self-doubt that eats you alive at 2 in the morning. And then came the survival show. And then came the elimination. Lino was one of the members who got eliminated during the net survival program Stray Kids in 2017. Eliminated. Cut. told he wasn't good enough to make the final lineup. Can you imagine the devastation? You leave a position dancing behind the world's biggest group. You bet everything on yourself, and then you're told you don't make the cut. Most people would have crumbled. Most people would have gone home, taken a desk job, and told themselves it wasn't meant to be. But Miho isn't most people. Bang Chan fought to bring him back, and JYP ultimately agreed, a decision that would prove to be one of the smartest in the company's history, because Lee No didn't just return to the group, he became its backbone. His role in Stray Kids is one of the most fascinating in all of fourth-generation K-pop. He's the main dancer, and when you watch him move, you're not watching someone who learned choreography, you're watching someone who speaks through movement. His body control is surgical. His expressions are cinematic. Dance analysts on YouTube have broken down his technique frame by frame and consistently point out something remarkable. Lee No doesn't just hit the beat, he lives inside it, stretching milliseconds into moments of pure visual storytelling. His performances in tracks like Maniac, Backdoor, and Thunderous aren't just dances, they're declarations of identity, each movement saying, "I was told I wasn't enough, and look where I'm standing now." But here's where it gets interesting, and here's where his retirement answer starts to make perfect sense. Lee No has never been the member who romanticizes idol life. In fact, he's the one who treats it with the most pragmatic, almost clinical detachment, not because he doesn't love it, but because he refuses to let it consume him. While other idols post curated selfies and carefully managed social media content, Miho posts pictures of his 3 cats, Suni, Doonji, and Dory, with a casualness that screams, "This is my real life, and you're just getting a glimpse." Those cats aren't just pets to him. In multiple interviews, he's described them as his emotional anchors, the beings who don't care about album sales, music show wins, or Billboard rankings. They greet him the same way whether he's coming home from a sold-out Tokyo Dome concert or a quiet afternoon at the dorm. That kind of unconditional connection is something Miho treasures above almost everything else, and it tells you everything about what he values most: authenticity, simplicity, and a life that isn't defined by public performance. So when the retirement question landed, Lee No answered with characteristic directness. No dramatic pause, no philosophical monologue, just a clean, honest number. Age 38. 38. Which means, from this very moment, Lee No sees himself continuing the idol journey for roughly another 12 years before stepping away. And if you know anything about Miho's personality, you know this wasn't a number he pulled out of thin air. This is a man who calculates everything. He's the member who plans his meals days in advance, who organizes his personal space with military precision, and who approaches every single schedule with a level of preparedness that even the staff finds intimidating. If he said 38, he means 38. He's probably already got a mental blueprint of what his life looks like on the other side. And what does that life look like? If you've been paying attention, the clues are everywhere. Miho has expressed interest in cooking, not as a casual hobby, but with genuine passion. He's appeared on cooking-related content and shown a level of skill that surprised even professional chefs. There are fans who half-jokingly, half-seriously predict that Lee No's second act will involve a restaurant, a quiet cafe, or some kind of culinary venture tucked away in a neighborhood where nobody cares about your melon chart position. He's also spoken about wanting to spend more time with his family, particularly his parents, who supported his dream even when the odds were brutal. In Korean culture, the concept of filial piety runs deep, and Miho carries that responsibility with visible reverence. Retiring at 38 would put him at an age where he's still young enough to build something new but experienced enough to build it wisely. It's the answer of a man who loves what he does but refuses to be trapped by it. And there's another layer here that most people miss: the physical toll. Dancing at the level Lee No operates isn't just demanding, it's destructive. The knees, the ankles, the lower back. Professional dancers know that every year on stage is a negotiation with your own body. Lee No has dealt with injuries before, moments where you could see the pain flash across his face during performances before he masked it with that trademark stoic expression. He knows his body has a shelf life at this intensity, and 38 is his honest assessment of how long he can maintain the standard he's set for himself. Because here's the thing about Miho, he would rather walk away at his peak than let the world watch him decline. That's not arrogance. That's pride forged in the fire of being told he wasn't good enough, fighting his way back, and refusing to ever give anyone a reason to doubt him again. 38 years old. The backup dancer who became a main dancer. The eliminated trainee who became irreplaceable. The cat dad who already knows exactly which door he'll walk through when the final encore fades. But don't get too comfortable with these answers, because the members coming up next are about to shift the entire energy of this list. If I.N set the floor at 35 and Lee No bumped it to 38, you might think this countdown is following a predictable pattern. Trust me, it's not. There's a member ahead whose answer is going to challenge everything you think you know about ambition in K-pop, and another whose response is so emotionally loaded that even the other members went silent when they heard it. The question isn't just about age anymore. It's about identity, sacrifice, and what it truly means to give your life to something bigger than yourself. Number 6, Hyunjin, the artist trapped inside an idol's body, a canvas waiting to be unleashed. Hwang Hyunjin. Born on March 20, 2000, in Seoul, South Korea, right in the beating heart of the city, where dreams are manufactured on assembly lines and discarded just as fast. But Hyunjin was never factory-made. From the moment he stepped into the public eye, there was something about him that felt different, something that transcended the polished, cookie-cutter mold that the K-pop industry so desperately tries to force onto its trainees. He was scouted on the streets, which in itself tells you a story. JYP Entertainment didn't find him through some formal audition pipeline or a carefully curated talent search. Someone saw him walking, existing, just being Hyunjin and thought, that one. The world needs to see that one. He entered JYP as a trainee, and from the very beginning, the label knew they had something volatile on their hands, not volatile in the destructive sense, but in the way that true artistry is always volatile, always unpredictable, always threatening to burst out of whatever container you try to shove it into. During the Stray Kids survival show, Hyunjin stood out not because he was the most technically polished, that title belonged to others, but because he performed with an emotional rawness that made you uncomfortable in the best possible way. When Hyunjin danced, you didn't just watch choreography, you watched a confession. Every movement carried weight. Every expression told a story that went beyond the lyrics, and every stage felt like he was peeling back a layer of himself that he'd never get back. That's not something you teach. That's something you're born with, and it's something that has made Hyunjin one of the most magnetic performers in the entire fourth generation of K-pop, a generation overflowing with talent and beauty, yet somehow still unable to produce anyone quite like him. His position in Stray Kids as a main dancer and lead rapper puts him at the intersection of physical artistry and lyrical expression, a dual role that demands both the discipline of a dancer and the vulnerability of a poet. And Hyunjin has delivered on both fronts with a consistency that borders on obsessive. Watch his solo stages, particularly his performances of Red Lights with Bang Chan or his iconic dance cover content, and you'll see someone who doesn't just learn a routine but inhabits it, transforms it, makes it entirely his own. Dance professionals have noted that Hyunjin's style is uniquely fluid, almost painterly, as if his body is a brush and the stage is his canvas. And that metaphor isn't accidental, because here's the thing about Hwang Hyunjin that separates his retirement answer from everyone else's on this list. He is a genuine, practicing, deeply passionate visual artist. Not in the way that some idols dabble in hobbies for variety show content or Instagram aesthetics. Hyunjin paints. Seriously. Obsessively. With the kind of devotion that makes you realize his identity was never fully contained by the word idol. He has shared his artwork with fans on multiple occasions, and the reaction from the art community has been genuinely impressed, not patronizing, not the usual, "Oh, how cute, the idol paints," condescension, but real recognition that this is someone with an authentic artistic voice that exists completely independent of his celebrity. His paintings are emotional, abstract, sometimes chaotic, sometimes hauntingly still. They look like the visual equivalent of Stray Kids music, full of tension and release, darkness and sudden bursts of color. He's spoken about how painting became his sanctuary during some of the most difficult periods of his career, a private space where nobody was judging his technique or comparing him to other idols, where the only standard was his own emotional truth. And it's that duality, the idol who fills arenas and the artist who craves solitude, that makes his retirement answer so perfectly, heartbreakingly logical. When the question about retirement age reached Hyunjin, something shifted in his expression. If you've watched enough Stray Kids content, you know Hyunjin's face is an open book. He can't hide his emotions even when he tries, and honestly, he stopped trying a long time ago. There was a pause, a flicker of something between excitement and melancholy, and then he gave his answer. Age 40. 40 years old. 2 full decades from his debut, and roughly 14 more years from now. On the surface, 40 might seem like a perfectly reasonable, even conservative number for someone in the entertainment industry. Many artists in the West are just hitting their stride at 40. But in K-pop, 40 is a statement. The idol system in South Korea is brutally youth-obsessed. The training, the fan service, the physical demands of comeback after comeback, the expectation to look a certain way, move a certain way, exist a certain way, it all operates on the unspoken assumption that this is a young person's game. Most idol groups don't survive past their late 20s as active performing units. The ones that do, groups like Super Junior, SHINee, or TVXQ, become the exceptions that prove the rule, and even they have shifted into more solo-focused, less intensive group activities as the years have passed. For Hyunjin to say 40, he's not just picking a number, he's drawing a line in the sand. He's saying, I will give this everything I have for as long as my body and my spirit allow, but there is a version of me that exists beyond the stage, and I owe it to that version to let him breathe. And that version, if every clue Hyunjin has ever dropped is any indication, is a fine artist. Not a celebrity who paints on the side, but a painter, a creator, someone who wakes up in the morning and walks to a studio that smells like turpentine and possibility instead of hairspray and schedules. He's hinted at wanting to hold exhibitions, to study art more formally, to explore mediums beyond acrylic and canvas. There's a world in Hyunjin's imagination where his name hangs on gallery walls instead of concert venue marquees, where people experience his work in silence rather than screams, where the connection between artist and audience is intimate rather than massive. And that world isn't a rejection of his idol career, it's the natural evolution of it. Everything Hyunjin has done on stage has been building toward a deeper understanding of himself as a creator, and at 40, he believes he'll have earned the right to pursue that understanding without the weight of schedules, promotions, and the relentless machinery of the K-pop industry pressing down on his shoulders. But there's also a physical reality that Hyunjin is quietly acknowledging. Dancing at his level, the level where every fan cam becomes a viral event, where choreographers specifically design moves to showcase his fluidity, takes an enormous toll. He's dealt with the aches, the fatigue, the moments backstage where adrenaline is the only thing keeping him upright. 40 is the age where he believes he can still be Hyunjin the performer without becoming a diminished version of himself. Like Miho, like every great athlete, he understands that the exit should happen while you're still at a level that honors everything you've built, not after the decline has already begun and the whispers have started. And yet, despite the certainty of his answer, there was something in his eyes when he said it, a softness, almost a grief, as if he was already mourning the future absence of something he hasn't lost yet. Because Hyunjin loves Stray Kids. He loves the chaos, the brotherhood, the creative electricity that happens when 8 people who genuinely trust each other step into a room and make something out of nothing. Walking away from that won't be easy. It never is for the ones who truly love it. But Hyunjin has always been someone who moves toward discomfort rather than away from it, who chooses growth over safety, who paints in bold strokes even when the subtle ones would be easier. 40. The age where the dancer becomes a painter, where the idol becomes an artist, where Hwang Hyunjin finally stops being what the industry made him and starts being what he was always meant to be. Now, you might be thinking this countdown is settling into a comfortable rhythm. 35, 38, 40, a neat, predictable escalation. But I need you to abandon that assumption right now, because the member coming next at number 5 is about to throw a curveball that redefines what it means to plan your future in this industry. And if you think the emotional weight of this list has peaked, you haven't seen anything yet. There are members still ahead whose answers aren't just numbers. They're love letters, battle cries, and quiet confessions that even their closest friends didn't fully expect. Number 5, Felix, the sunshine who crossed oceans for a dream, but home is calling him back. Leave Felix. Born Lee Yonbok on September 15, 2000, in Sydney, Australia, not Seoul, not Busan, not Daegu, but Sydney. 14,000 kilometers away from the country that would eventually make him a superstar. And that distance isn't just geographical, it's cultural, emotional, and linguistic. Try to imagine what it takes for a Korean-Australian teenager to look at his comfortable suburban life in Sydney, a life with friends, family barbecues, weekend cricket, and ocean breezes, and say, no. I'm going to fly to the other side of the planet, to a country where I barely speak the language, to audition for one of the most competitive entertainment companies on Earth, and I'm going to make it. That's not ambition. That's insanity wrapped in faith. Felix auditioned for JYP Entertainment through a global audition in 2017, and the moment he walked into that room, the trajectory of his life changed forever. He was accepted as a trainee and shipped off to Seoul, where he was immediately confronted with the most brutal reality of his decision. He could barely speak Korean. In a country where language is identity, where hierarchy is built into every sentence through honorifics and speech levels, Felix was essentially a mute prodigy. He could dance. God, could he dance? His movements carried the kind of natural swagger that you can't manufacture, a rhythm born from growing up with Western pop culture, hip-hop influences, and the raw physicality of Australian youth culture. But when it came to communicating with his fellow trainees, with the coaches, with the staff who held his future in their clipboards, Felix was drowning. And then came the survival show, and then came the elimination. Just like Lee Know, Felix was eliminated during the net survival program. The official reason was that his Korean wasn't strong enough, that the language barrier would hold the group back. But anyone who watched that episode knows the real story. It was one of the most gut-wrenching moments in K-pop survival show history. Felix didn't just cry, he shattered. The footage shows a boy, not an idol, not a performer, but a boy who had crossed an ocean for this one chance and was watching it dissolve in real time. Bang Chan, who shares that Australian connection with Felix, was devastated. The other members were devastated. The viewers were devastated. It was the kind of moment that turns a TV show into a cultural memory, a timestamp that fans can never forget because it exposed the human cost behind the polished product of K-pop. But the story didn't end there, because JYP brought Felix back. Whether it was the public outcry, Bang Chan's advocacy, or the label's own realization that Felix possessed something genuinely irreplaceable, the decision was reversed, and Lee Yonbok from Sydney was back in the lineup. And what he did next was nothing short of heroic. He learned Korean. Not slowly, not casually, not with the half-hearted effort of someone who knows they can always go home. He attacked the language with a ferocity that stunned his teachers and his group mates. Within months, he was conversational. Within a year, he was fluent enough to do interviews. Within 2 years, he was cracking jokes, writing lyrics in Korean, and navigating the impossible maze of Korean variety show culture with a charm that made veteran MCs look twice. And through it all, that voice. That impossibly deep, earth-shaking bass voice that has become one of the most recognizable sounds in all of K-pop. Felix's voice is an anomaly, a seismic rumble housed inside the body of someone who looks like a fairy dusted in freckles and sunshine. It shouldn't work. It defies every conventional standard of what a K-pop vocalist should sound like. But it does work spectacularly because Felix doesn't just use his voice to sing or rap, he uses it to create atmosphere. When Felix's deep tone drops into a Stray Kids track, the entire song shifts gravity. It's a secret weapon that 3RACHA, the producing unit of Bang Chan, Changbin, and Han, has learned to deploy with surgical precision, and it's one of the key sonic textures that separates Stray Kids from every other group in the industry. His duality is legendary among Stay. On stage, Felix can be intimidating, fierce, a presence that commands attention with narrowed eyes and razor-sharp movements. Off stage, he bakes. He bakes brownies, cookies, cakes, elaborate pastries that he wraps carefully and distributes to members, staff, and anyone within arm's reach. He speaks in a soft, gentle voice that is the polar opposite of his performance register, and he has a habit of telling people he loves them with a sincerity so pure it almost feels illegal in an industry built on manufactured emotions. Felix is, by every possible measure, the emotional sunlight of Stray Kids, the member who makes everyone around him feel warm, safe, and valued. And that warmth, that nurturing instinct, that deep craving for genuine human connection, is exactly what defines his retirement answer. When the question was posed, Felix didn't go through the analytical process that Lino did, and he didn't carry the melancholic artistry of Hyunjin's response. Instead, Felix's answer came from somewhere deeply personal, somewhere that smelled like eucalyptus and sounded like his mother's voice calling him in from the backyard. Age 42. 42 years old. More than 2 decades of idol life from debut to finish line. And the reason behind this number is as beautiful as it is bittersweet. Felix wants to go home. Not permanently, not as a retreat, not as someone running away from anything, but as someone who has spent his entire adult life in a country that wasn't his first home and wants to experience the one that was. Australia lives inside Felix like a second heartbeat. He talks about it in interviews with a nostalgia that isn't performative. You can hear the genuine ache in his voice when he describes the beaches, the open spaces, the casual warmth of Australian culture that is so different from the high-pressure, hierarchical intensity of Korean entertainment. He's missed birthdays. He's missed family holidays. He's missed the slow, unremarkable Tuesday afternoons that don't mean anything on paper, but mean everything when you've been gone long enough to forget what they feel like. His parents supported his dream unconditionally, and that sacrifice has never been lost on Felix. In V-Lives and fan meetings, he's become visibly emotional when talking about his family, his voice dropping even lower than usual as he fights to keep composure. 42 gives Felix something precious, a chance to return to Sydney not as a visitor squeezing in a 3-day trip between schedules, but as someone who can actually settle, breathe, reconnect with the roots he left behind at 17. He's expressed interest in opening a bakery or a cafe, a place where the skills he's been quietly perfecting behind the scenes can become something tangible, something that doesn't require a stadium or a light stick to appreciate. Imagine a little cafe in Sydney's inner west, the smell of fresh sourdough and homemade brownies drifting out the door, and behind the counter, a freckled man with the deepest voice you've ever heard asking if you'd like your coffee with oat milk. That's Felix's dream. That's what 42 means to him. But don't mistake this for someone who's counting the days until escape. Felix loves Stray Kids with every fiber of his being. He loves Stay with a devotion that has brought him to tears more times than anyone can count. The thought of leaving doesn't excite him, it terrifies him. But he also knows that the boy who left Sydney deserves to come back as a man who experienced everything, gave everything, and chose to come home not because the world rejected him, but because the world embraced him so completely that he finally had the courage to let go. 42 isn't an ending for Felix. It's a homecoming. A return to the ocean, the sun, and the family that let him go so the world could have him. And if that doesn't hit you right in the chest, then I don't know what will. But listen, if you think the emotional intensity of this list has reached its ceiling, you are profoundly mistaken. The members ahead aren't just giving numbers anymore. They're making declarations. And one of them, the one sitting at the very top of this countdown, gave an answer so powerful that it redefined what the word commitment means in the context of K-pop. But first, we've got 3 more members to go, and the next one at number 4 is about to surprise you in a way you absolutely did not anticipate. Number 4, Seungmin, the perfectionist who quietly became irreplaceable. His answer will redefine dedication. Kim Seungmin. Born on September 22, 2000, in Seoul, South Korea, raised in the same relentless city that churns out idols by the hundreds, yet somehow, against all statistical probability, Produced someone who would become one of the most technically respected vocalists in the entire fourth generation of K-pop. But here's the thing about Seungmin that you need to understand before we even get to his retirement answer. He was never supposed to be the one who stood out. In a group that has Bang Chan's producing genius, Changbin's ferocious rap delivery, Han's explosive versatility, Hyunjin's visual magnetism, Felix's viral deep voice, Lee's dance mastery, and I.N's youthful charm, Seungmin entered the equation as the member most people couldn't quite categorize. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the most dramatic. He didn't have a viral moment on the survival show that spawned 1,000 fan edits. What Kim Seungmin had was something far more dangerous in the long run: discipline. Pure, terrifying, unwavering discipline. Before JYP Entertainment, Seungmin participated in the reality survival show The Fan on SBS, and before that, he passed the JYP Open audition, beating out thousands of hopefuls with nothing but his raw vocal ability and a quiet determination that evaluators later described as unnerving for someone so young. He didn't walk into the audition room with theatrical confidence or manufactured swagger. He walked in like someone who had already decided he was going to succeed and was simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. That energy has never left him. During the Stray Kids survival show, while other members had dramatic arcs, eliminations, emotional breakdowns, fiery confrontations, Seungmin's arc was almost invisible. He improved. Silently, consistently, relentlessly. Episode after episode, his vocal control got tighter, his pitch accuracy became surgical, his emotional delivery deepened. He wasn't the member who made you cry with a dramatic speech. He was the member who made you cry 3 months later when you rewatched the show and realized he had been quietly becoming extraordinary while everyone else was busy being loud. And that pattern, silent excellence, invisible evolution, the art of becoming indispensable without ever demanding attention, has defined his entire career in Stray Kids. Seungmin is the group's lead vocalist, and in live performance settings, he is arguably their most reliable singer. Studio recordings can be polished, auto-tuned, layered, and perfected by producers. But live stages? Live stages expose everything. They expose the member who stayed up too late, the one who's fighting a cold, the one whose technique cracks under pressure. Seungmin doesn't crack. He has become legendary among vocal analysts on YouTube and Korean music forums for his live stability, the ability to deliver studio-quality vocals while executing full choreography, night after night, city after city, across world tours that span months. His performance in tracks like Levanter, Winter Falls, Haven, and Hold showcase a vocalist who doesn't just sing notes, but sculpts emotions, shaping each phrase with the precision of someone who has spent thousands of hours in practice rooms when nobody was watching. And that's not hyperbole. Seungmin is famously the member who practices the most. Not in a competitive sense, not to outshine anyone, but because his standard for himself is so astronomically high that good enough doesn't exist in his vocabulary. Other members have talked about finding Seungmin in the practice room at hours when normal people are sleeping, running the same vocal passage over and over until it meets an internal benchmark that only he can hear. That level of self-imposed perfectionism is both his greatest strength and his heaviest burden, because it means Seungmin never fully rests, never fully celebrates, never fully allows himself to enjoy a performance, because there's always a note he thinks could have been cleaner, a breath mark he thinks could have been tighter, a transition he thinks could have been smoother. And beyond the vocals, there's a side of Seungmin that fans have latched onto with an almost obsessive affection: his love for baseball. Kim Seungmin is not a casual sports fan. He is a devoted, encyclopedic, borderline fanatical follower of baseball, with a particular allegiance to the LA Dodgers and Korean baseball. He has thrown ceremonial first pitches at KBO League games, and his pitching form has been praised by actual professional players. He watches games with the analytical intensity of a scout, breaking down plays and statistics with a fluency that suggests he could genuinely pursue sports broadcasting if he ever wanted to. He collects baseball merchandise, visits stadiums whenever Stray Kids' touring schedule allows, and has turned multiple members into reluctant baseball fans through sheer enthusiasm and persistent persuasion. It's endearing, it's authentic, and it's the clearest window into who Seungmin is beyond the idol persona, someone who commits fully to whatever captures his heart, whether that's a vocal riff or a curveball. So when the retirement question was asked, you might expect Seungmin to give a careful, measured, perfectly calculated answer. And in a way, he did. But the number he chose carries layers of meaning that go far deeper than surface-level arithmetic. Age 45. 45 years old. Nearly 3 decades of active idol life, spanning from his teenage debut to the midpoint of middle age. And if that number sounds ambitious, then you don't know Seungmin at all. Because Seungmin's answer isn't about fame, money, or legacy in the way the industry typically defines those words. It's about mastery. Seungmin is chasing vocal mastery the way a monk chases enlightenment. It's not a destination, it's a practice, an endless refinement that only deepens the more time you spend with it. At 45, he believes he will have reached the fullest expression of what his voice can be, having spent decades maturing it, strengthening it, exploring its every register and texture. Vocalists peak differently than dancers. While the physical toll of choreography creates a natural expiration date for performers like Lee No and Hyunjin, a well-maintained voice can actually improve with age. The depth, the warmth, the emotional resonance, these qualities often become richer as a singer moves through their 30s and into their 40s. Seungmin knows this. He has studied the careers of vocalists he admires, both in K-pop and in Western music, and he's acutely aware that some of the greatest vocal performances in music history were delivered by artists well past the age when society told them they should have quit. He's also spoken about wanting to mentor the next generation. Not in a vague, PR-friendly way, but with genuine specificity. He wants to teach. He wants to sit in a vocal booth with a terrified trainee and show them the exercises that saved him on days when his voice wouldn't cooperate, the breathing techniques that carried him through back-to-back concert schedules, the mental frameworks that kept perfectionism from becoming paralysis. Seungmin wants to give back to the system that shaped him, but he wants to do it as someone who's still active, still performing, still proving that the lessons he teaches aren't theoretical, they're lived. That's why 45 isn't just a retirement age for Seungmin. It's a statement about how long greatness takes. It's an acknowledgement that the craft he has chosen requires a lifetime of devotion, and he's willing to give it nearly 3 decades before he considers the work complete. And there's one more thing, the thing that Seungmin would probably never say publicly, but that everyone close to him knows. He doesn't want to be the first one to leave. He doesn't want to be the member who steps away while the others are still standing. His loyalty to Stray Kids isn't just professional, it's deeply personal, forged in trainee rooms and van rides and shared meals, and the 1,000 small moments that cameras never capture. 45 gives him the mathematical comfort of knowing he'll still be there when the group needs him, still holding down the vocal foundation while others explore solo ventures, still being the reliable one, the consistent one, the member you never have to worry about because he's already done the work before anyone thought to ask. But here's where this list starts to enter territory that will genuinely shake you. We're down to the top 3 now, and the members remaining aren't just committed, they're consumed. Their answers don't just reflect career plans, they reflect identities so deeply intertwined with music and performance that separation isn't just difficult, it might be impossible. The next member at number 3 gave an answer that made the entire room go quiet, and when you hear why, you'll understand that for some people, retirement isn't a plan, it's a threat. Number 3, Changbin, the dark horse who raps like his life depends on it, because it does. Seo Changbin. Born on August 11, 1999, in Yongin, South Korea, a sprawling satellite city south of Seoul that sits in the shadow of the capital, but has quietly produced some of the most hardened, hungry artists the Korean entertainment industry has ever seen. And hungry is the only word that truly captures what Changbin is. Not hungry for fame. Not hungry for money. Hungry for respect. Hungry for the kind of recognition that doesn't come from music show trophies or Billboard placements, but from the gut-level acknowledgement that you are one of the best to ever do it. Changbin entered JYP Entertainment as a trainee with one singular obsession: rap. Not singing, not dancing, not variety show charm, not visual appeal. Rap. The art of words delivered at velocity, of syllables compressed into bullets, of rhythm weaponized into something that doesn't just entertain but attacks. And from the very first moment he opened his mouth on the Stray Kids survival show, it was clear that this wasn't a boy playing rapper. This was a rapper who happened to be in a boy group. His audition stages were violent in the most artistic sense of the word. While other trainees delivered safe, crowd-pleasing performances designed to earn approval from the judges, Changbin came out swinging. His flow was aggressive, his wordplay was dense, his delivery carried a weight that seemed physically impossible coming from someone his size. Because here's the detail that shocks people who've only ever seen Changbin through a screen: he's small. 5'6" on a generous day. In an industry obsessed with height, proportions, and the physical architecture of an idol's body, Changbin was statistically disadvantaged before he ever rapped a single bar. And he turned that disadvantage into a weapon. There's a famous saying among Stay: Changbin is short until he opens his mouth, and then he's the tallest person in the room. It's funny, but it's also devastatingly accurate. When Changbin performs, his physical dimensions become irrelevant because his presence expands to fill every corner of whatever space he's in. He doesn't command a stage, he conquers it, bar by bar, breath by breath, with a technical proficiency that has earned him consistent placement in conversations about the greatest idol rappers in K-pop history. Not fourth generation. History. Alongside names like BTS's RM and Suga, Big Bang's G-Dragon and TP, and Block B's Zico, Changbin has carved out a reputation that transcends generational boundaries, and he's done it without a single solo album. Without a solo variety show platform, and without any of the individual promotional machinery that typically elevates an idol rapper from group member to recognized artist. He did it purely through his craft, through verses so technically dense that Korean hip-hop heads have to listen 3 or 4 times to catch every double entendre, every internal rhyme, every rhythmic shift that arrives so seamlessly it feels inevitable. And then there's 3 Racha. The production and songwriting unit consisting of Bang Chan, Changbin, and Han. This trio is the creative engine that drives Stray Kids, and within that engine, Changbin is the combustion. While Bang Chan provides the structural architecture and Han delivers the emotional volatility, Changbin brings the raw firepower, the verses that anchor tracks, the hooks that burrow into your skull, the ad-libs that turn a good song into an unforgettable one. 3 Racha has been credited on virtually every Stray Kids album, a level of creative control that is almost unheard of in K-pop, where most groups perform material written entirely by external producers. Stray Kids' identity as a self-producing group isn't just a marketing tagline, it's the core of their existence, and Changbin is one of the 3 pillars holding that core upright. He has writing credits on hundreds of songs. Hundreds. Each one carrying his fingerprint, his perspective, his emotional DNA. That's not a career, that's a body of work, and Changbin treats it with the reverence of someone who understands that these songs will outlive the stages they were performed on. Which brings us to the question. When the retirement topic surfaced, something interesting happened with Changbin. He didn't go quiet like Hyunjin. He didn't calculate like Lino. He didn't soften like Felix. Instead, Changbin got intense. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. You could almost see the internal debate happening in real time, the rapper in him wanting to say never, the realist in him knowing that forever is a promise no human body can keep. And then he answered. Age 48. 48 years old. 3 full decades from debut to final bow. 30 years of writing, recording, performing, and pouring every ounce of his creative energy into an art form that most people treat as a phase. And the way he said it carried the weight of a vow, not a guess. 48 for Changbin isn't a prediction. It's a minimum sentence he's imposed on himself, a non-negotiable commitment to the craft that saved his life. And that's not dramatic language. Changbin has been remarkably open about his struggles with self-worth, about the periods where he questioned whether he was good enough, talented enough, valuable enough to deserve his place in Stray Kids. In lyrics, in interviews, in late-night conversations with fans, He has described a darkness that goes beyond typical idol stress, a fundamental crisis of identity that asked whether the person behind the rapper was worth anything at all. Music wasn't just his career. It was his therapy, his language, his proof of existence. Every verse he wrote was an argument against the voice in his head that told him he didn't matter, and every stage he dominated was a verdict in his favor. You don't walk away from something like that at 35 or 40. You can't. When your art is the very mechanism that keeps you psychologically intact, retirement isn't a relief, it's a threat. Changbin knows this about himself with a clarity that is both admirable and heartbreaking. He knows that the day he stops creating is the day he has to confront the silence, and he's not ready for that silence yet. Not at 25. Not at 35. Maybe not even at 48. But 48 is the number he chose because it represents the furthest horizon he can see while still being honest. He doesn't want to make promises his body can't keep. He's watched older rappers in the Korean and American hip-hop scenes struggle with the physical demands of live performance, the breath control deteriorating, the energy levels dropping, the sharpness fading by degrees so small you don't notice until one day the fire that used to rage is just embers. Changbin refuses to become embers. If he's going to do this, he's going to do it at full intensity or not at all. 48 gives him 3 decades to burn at maximum output, and when the flame finally lowers, he wants it to be a conscious choice, not a slow decay. But there's another dimension to this answer that speaks to something Changbin rarely discusses publicly: legacy. He wants to leave behind a body of work so vast, so diverse, so technically accomplished that future generations of Korean rappers will study his verses the way literature students study poetry. He wants every bar he ever wrote to be archived, analyzed, and appreciated not as idle music, but as genuine artistry. 30 years gives him the canvas to build that legacy, to evolve from the aggressive young rapper who proved doubters wrong into a mature, seasoned artist whose later work carries the wisdom and depth that only time can provide. He's talked about wanting to produce for other artists, to mentor young rappers who come from backgrounds like his, kids who don't fit the physical mold, who aren't the tallest or the most conventionally handsome, who have nothing but their words and their hunger. Changbin wants to be the proof that those things are enough. And at 48, after 3 decades of living that proof, he believes his testimony will be undeniable. The room was different after Changbin gave his answer. Heavier. More serious. Because when someone tells you they need their art the way most people need oxygen, you stop hearing a career plan and start hearing a survival strategy. 48 isn't just a number for CO Changbin. It's the length of time he's willing to fight, and if you've ever watched him rap, you know Changbin doesn't fight to participate. He fights to win. Now, we're in the final 2. The top 2 members of Stray Kids whose retirement answers didn't just raise eyebrows, they stopped conversations. One of them turned the question into a philosophical declaration that stunned even the members who thought they knew him best. And the other? The other gave an answer that transcends K-pop entirely, an answer so powerful it belongs in the history books. You're not ready. But let's go anyway. Number 2, Han. The genius who writes with blood and tears, the answer that silenced the room. Han Jae-sung. Born on September 14, 2000, in Incheon, South Korea, but raised, in part, in Malaysia, a biographical detail that most casual fans skim over, but that fundamentally shaped the person he would become. Before Han was a K-pop idol, before he was 1/3 of the most prolific self-producing unit in 4th-generation history, before he became the member whose verses cut so deep they leave emotional scars on listeners, he was a Korean kid in a Malaysian school trying to figure out where he belonged. Not Korean enough for Korea, not Malaysian enough for Malaysia, suspended between 2 worlds with a brain that moved too fast and a heart that felt too much. That duality, the outsider who observes everything because he never fully fits in, became the engine that would power one of the most extraordinary creative minds in modern K-pop. Jae-sung returned to Korea and entered JYP Entertainment as a trainee, and within weeks, the company knew they had a problem on their hands. Not a bad problem. A glorious, uncontrollable, once-in-a-generation problem. Han Jae-sung could do everything. He could rap with a speed and technical precision that rivaled trainees who had been practicing for years longer. He could sing with an emotional texture that vocal trainers couldn't teach because it came from a place deeper than technique. It came from lived experience, from the loneliness of being a kid between cultures, from the anxiety that already hummed beneath his skin like a second nervous system. And he could write. Oh, could he write? While other trainees were memorizing lyrics penned by professional songwriters, Jisung was filling notebooks with his own words, crafting verses at a pace that alarmed even the JYP staff who had seen prodigies come and go. By the time the Stray Kids survival show aired, Han wasn't just auditioning for a spot in the group. He was already co-creating the group's musical identity alongside Bang Chan and Changbin. 3 Racha existed before Stray Kids did. Let that sink in. The creative nucleus was already operational, already producing tracks, already uploading music to SoundCloud under aliases before the group even had an official name. Han was 17 years old, writing lyrics about mental health, societal pressure, identity crisis, and existential dread with a sophistication that grown adults with decades of life experience couldn't match. It wasn't precocious, it was prophetic, as if Jisung was writing from a future version of himself and sending the messages back in time. And then came the debut, and then came the albums, and then came the relentless, beautiful, agonizing output that has defined Han's career ever since. His contribution to Stray Kids' discography is staggering. Across every album, every B-side, every title track, Han's fingerprints are everywhere, in the lyrics that make fans pause and replay, in the melodies that lodge in your consciousness and refuse to leave, in the rap verses that shift from whispered vulnerability to screaming defiance within the span of a single bar. Songs like Elevator, God's Menu, Thunderous, Maniac, S-Class, La 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 La, these aren't just hits. They're chapters in an ongoing autobiography written in real time by someone who processes the world through music the way most people process it through conversation. But the gift that makes Han extraordinary is also the weight that makes his life extraordinarily difficult. Han Jisung has been publicly, courageously, almost defiantly open about his struggles with anxiety and panic disorder. In an industry that punishes vulnerability, that treats mental health as a liability rather than a reality, Jisung stood in front of millions and said, "I am not okay, and I refuse to pretend otherwise." He has described panic attacks that hit without warning on stage, in waiting rooms, in the quiet moments between schedules when the adrenaline fades and the mind turns on itself. He has talked about the medication, the therapy, the breathing exercises, the moments where the walls close in and the only thing that keeps him anchored is the knowledge that 7 other people are counting on him. And he shows up anyway. Every single time. He walks onto stages that trigger the very anxiety he battles and performs with an intensity that makes you forget he's fighting a war inside his own head while simultaneously delivering flawless vocals and razor-sharp rap. That's not entertainment. That's heroism in sneakers and stage makeup. There was a period during Stray Kids' career where Han stepped back from certain live activities due to his condition, and Stay's response was immediate and overwhelming, not anger, not frustration, but a wall of unconditional support so massive it moved Jisung to tears. He later said that Stay's reaction during that period was one of the most healing experiences of his life, that knowing his fans loved him regardless of whether he was performing or resting fundamentally changed his relationship with his own anxiety. It didn't cure it, nothing cures it, but it gave him a reason to keep fighting that went beyond professional obligation. It became personal. Every stage after that wasn't just a performance, it was a thank you letter written in sweat and melody. So when the retirement question reached Han Jisung, the atmosphere in the room shifted into something almost sacred. The other members could feel it. They knew that this question, for Jisung, wasn't about career planning or financial security or post-idol ambitions. This question was about whether the thing that simultaneously tortures him and saves him, music, performance, the act of standing in front of thousands and turning his pain into something beautiful, would eventually become too heavy to carry. And Jisung sat with it. He sat with it for longer than any other member. The silence wasn't awkward, it was loaded, the kind of silence that happens when someone is accessing a truth so deep it takes time to surface. And when he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but his eyes were glassy, and the answer he gave was age 50. 50 years old. Half a century of life, with more than 30 years of it devoted to music. And the way he explained it broke something in the room that hasn't fully healed since. Jisung said that music isn't something he does, it's something he is. It's the language he speaks when Korean and English and every other human language fails him. It's the only space where his anxiety doesn't define him, where the chaos inside his head becomes structured, rhythmic, purposeful. Without music, he doesn't know who he is. Without performance, he doesn't know where his energy goes. Without the act of writing lyrics at 3 a.m, wrestling with words until they bleed into exactly the right shape, he doesn't know how to process the world. 50 isn't just a number for Han, it's the absolute limit of what he can imagine his body allowing, the furthest edge of physical possibility before the voice gives out, before the knees refuse to bend, before the lungs can't sustain the breath control that his rapid-fire rap style demands. If his body could last longer, the number would be higher. If human biology weren't a factor, Han Jisung would never stop. That's not a poetic exaggeration, that's the raw, unfiltered truth of someone who has fused his identity so completely with his art that the boundary between Han the person and Han the artist has dissolved entirely. And there's a dimension to this answer that connects directly to his mental health journey. For Jisung, retirement doesn't just mean the end of a career, it means the removal of his primary coping mechanism. The stage isn't just where he performs. It's where he heals. The recording studio isn't just where he works. It's where he breathes. Taking that away at 40 or 45 would be like removing a life support system from someone who is still very much alive and very much in need of it. 50 gives him the maximum runway to gradually build alternative structures of meaning, other ways to create, other ways to connect, other ways to process, before the stage goes dark. He's not naive about this. He knows that dependency on any single thing is dangerous, and he's working on it, slowly, with the help of professionals and the support of people who love him. But for now, music is his answer to everything, and 50 years old is the longest he can keep that answer valid. The members didn't speak for a while after Han finished. Changbin looked at the floor. Felix's eyes were wet. Even Bang Chan, who has heard Jisung at his most vulnerable more times than anyone, seemed to absorb the weight of the moment with a gravity that transcended their leader-member dynamic. Because they all understood something that fans can only glimpse from the outside, Han Jisung doesn't just love music. He survives through it. And 50 isn't a retirement age. It's a prayer. A whispered negotiation with time, with biology, with the universe itself. Please, let me keep this thing that keeps me whole for as long as humanly possible. And now we arrive at the summit. Number 1. The final answer. The member whose response doesn't just top this list, it redefines it entirely. If Han's answer was a prayer, then the answer at number 1 is a covenant, an unbreakable vow delivered with the kind of quiet certainty that makes the air in the room feel different. You've made it this far. You've heard 7 answers that ranged from practical to emotional to existential. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has prepared you for what comes next. Number 1. Bang Chan. The man who built a kingdom and refuses to leave the throne. The answer that changed everything. Christopher Bang. Bang Chan, born on October 3, 1997, in Sydney, Australia. The eldest, the leader, the architect, the sleepless guardian who poured his blood into the blueprint of a group that the world told him would never work. And if every member's answer on this list has been a window into their soul, then Bang Chan's answer is the entire house. Every room, every wall, every hidden corner where the memories live and the promises are kept. To understand why his answer sits at the undisputed summit of this countdown, you have to go back. Not to the debut. Not to the survival show. You have to go back to 2010, when a 13-year-old Korean-Australian boy walked into JYP Entertainment and began a trainee journey that would last 7 years. 7 years. Let that number settle into your bones, because most people cannot comprehend what 7 years of training actually means in the K-pop system. It means waking up before sunrise and collapsing after midnight. It means being evaluated every month, ranked against your peers, told what's wrong with your voice, your face, your body, your personality, your marketability. It means watching other trainees debut while you stay behind, watching them succeed while you're still running vocal scales in a practice room that smells like sweat and broken dreams. It means calling your parents in Sydney at odd hours, hearing your little sister's voice grow older through a phone speaker, missing birthdays, missing Christmases, missing the slow, irreplaceable moments of family life that you can never get back. 7 years. From 2010 to 2017. Most trainees don't last too. The dropout rate in major K-pop companies is staggering. Estimates suggest that less than 5% of trainees who enter the system ever debut. The rest are discarded, sent home with nothing but a suitcase of regrets and a resume gap that the real world doesn't understand. Bang Chan survived all 7 years, and he didn't just survive, he evolved. He entered JYP as a kid who could sing. He left the trainee system as a producer, songwriter, arranger, vocalist, rapper, dancer, and leader who had taught himself music production on a laptop in his dorm room because waiting for someone else to create opportunities was never going to be fast enough. He learned to use Logic Pro, then expanded to Ableton, studying production tutorials in English and Korean simultaneously, dissecting tracks from artists across every genre, hip-hop, EDM, pop, rock, R&B, and reverse engineering them until he understood not just how music was made, but why certain combinations of sound made people feel things they couldn't articulate. By the time JYP Entertainment gave him the chance to form his own group, Bang Chan wasn't just ready. He was overqualified. And the group he formed wasn't assembled by executives in a boardroom. It was handpicked by Chan himself. He chose Changbin for his lyrical ferocity. He chose Han for his impossible versatility. Together, the three of them became 3RACHA, and 3RACHA became the creative spine of Stray Kids before Stray Kids even existed as a concept. When the survival show aired and members were eliminated, it was Chan who fought to bring them back. Lino and Felix, the two members the system deemed expendable, were saved because their leader refused to accept a version of the group that didn't include them. That decision wasn't strategic. It was moral. Chan saw something in those two that transcended evaluations and scorecards, something human and essential, and he put his own credibility on the line to protect it. That's not leadership. That's fatherhood disguised as a job title. And from the moment Stray Kids debuted on March 25, 2018, Bang Chan has operated at a level of output that borders on self-destruction. He produces. He writes. He arranges. He records guide vocals for every member. He stays in the studio until dawn, not because anyone forces him to, but because every song that leaves that room carries his name, and he refuses to let anything below his standard reach the public. He hosts or hosted a regular live broadcast called Chan's Room, later known as Stay with Chan, where he spends hours talking to fans, playing unreleased music, giving life advice, and simply being present in a way that no other idol leader has ever consistently maintained. Those broadcasts became legendary. They weren't scripted. They weren't managed by PR teams. They were raw, real, sometimes emotional late-night conversations between a man and the millions of people who love him. He's cried on those broadcasts. He's laughed until he couldn't breathe. He's played songs that would appear on albums months later and watched in real time as fans lost their minds. Chan's Room wasn't content, it was communion. The physical toll of this lifestyle is something Chan rarely discusses, but the evidence is visible if you know where to look. The dark circles that no amount of concealer fully hides. The moments backstage, captured by behind-the-scenes cameras, where he closes his eyes and leans against a wall for 30 seconds of silence before summoning the energy to walk back into the noise. The way he rolls his shoulders during rehearsals, working out tension that has become a permanent resident in his body. He has been doing this since he was 13 years old. His body has been in the K-pop machine for more than half his life. And yet, and this is the part that separates Bang Chan from virtually every other idol who has ever lived, he doesn't complain. Not because he's suppressing it. Not because he's performing toughness. but because, on a fundamental, cellular level, Christopher Bang believes that this is what he was put on Earth to do. He has said, in multiple interviews, in multiple languages, with the kind of quiet conviction that makes skeptics go silent, that Stray Kids is not his job. It's his purpose. Stay is not his fan base. They're his family. Music is not his career. It's his oxygen. And when the retirement question finally reached him, the last member, the leader, the one everyone was waiting for, the room held its breath. Every member turned to look at him. The camera operators tightened their shots. The air itself seemed to compress, as if the universe knew that whatever came out of Bang Chan's mouth next was going to matter in a way that transcended entertainment. And Chan smiled. Not his performance smile, not his leader being strong smile, but the small, private, almost embarrassed smile of a man who knows his answer is going to sound crazy and doesn't care. And he said it. Not a number. Not a specific age. I don't think about retirement. I'll keep going until my body can't anymore. Until his body can't anymore. Not 50. Not 55. Not 60. Until the physical machinery of his existence physically refuses to cooperate. That's not a retirement plan. That's an oath written in muscle and bone. And when the words left his mouth, the reaction in the room was immediate and visceral. Changbin nodded slowly, as if hearing confirmation of something he already knew. Han looked away, blinking rapidly. Felix covered his mouth with his hand. I.N stared at his leader with an expression that mixed admiration with something close to fear not of Chan, but for him, for the man who gives so relentlessly that the people who love him most are sometimes terrified he'll give until there's nothing left. Because that's the shadow side of Bang Chan's answer. Until my body can't anymore is beautiful, but it's also a confession. It's an admission that Bang Chan doesn't know how to exist without this. He's been in the system since he was a child. He has no adult memories that don't involve training, producing, performing, or leading. The question isn't whether Chan can retire, it's whether Chan knows who he is without the title, without the responsibility, without the 7 people who look to him for direction and the millions who look to him for comfort. And there you have it. 8 members. 8 answers. 8 completely different relationships with the same impossible question. When do you stop doing the thing that made you who you are? From I.N's brave honesty about wanting a normal life at 35 to Bang Chan's breathtaking refusal to even acknowledge an endpoint, this countdown has revealed something profound about Stray Kids that no music show win, no album sale, no concert ticket count could ever capture. These aren't 8 guys following a company's orders. These are 8 individuals who chose each other, who fight for each other, and who, despite having wildly different visions of their futures, share one unshakable truth. Every second they've spent as Stray Kids has been worth the sacrifice. The magne wants freedom. The dancer wants peace. The artist wants a canvas. The sunshine wants home. The perfectionist wants mastery. The rapper wants legacy. The genius wants survival. And the leader? The leader just wants to keep going for them, for Stay, for the music, for the kid who flew from Sydney to Seoul at 13 with nothing but a dream and a refusal to quit. Whether they retire at 35 or never retire at all, one thing is already certain: Stray Kids didn't just change K-pop. They changed the meaning of commitment in an industry built on disposability. And that legacy? That doesn't retire. Ever. Thank you for staying until the very end. If these words moved you, if they made you see your favorite group a little differently, then this countdown did exactly what it was meant to do. This has been your edutainment top list experience. Until the next one, stay curious, stay emotional, and most importantly, stay.